Okay, good morning everyone. How are you? Thank you once again for joining us this morning for today's service. Let me just go ahead and make sure everything is working well with the stream before we continue on. So give me just a minute. Yep, looks like the audio is working and we're good to go. So let's go ahead and get started with worship this morning. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God. He that loveth not, know not God, for God is love. Beloved, let us love one another. Beloved, let us love one another. For love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God. He that loveth not, know not God, for God is love. Beloved, let us love one another. Beloved, let us love one another. For love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God. He that loveth not, know not God, for God is love. Beloved, let us love one another. He that loveth not, know not God, for God is love. Beloved, let us love one another. Now let's continue with For Your Name. Into your presence I will come, to lift my voice, to lift you up. My feet are planted on the rock that is higher than I. Into your presence I will come, to lift my voice, to lift you up. My feet are planted on the rock that is higher than I. For your name, for your glory, I will live. for your kingdom, for your truth. I will boast of your great love. For you alone are God. Into your presence I will come, to lift my voice, to lift you up. My feet are planted on the rock that is higher than I. For your name, for your glory, I will live, I will worship with my heart. For the cross, for your kingdom, for your truth, I will boast of your great love. For you alone are God. You alone are God, and you are good. 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 For your name, for your glory, I will live, I will worship with my heart. For the cross, for your kingdom, for your truth, I will boast of your great love. You alone are God, and you are good. Yes, you alone are God, and you are good. You alone are God, and you are good. You alone are God, and you are good. For your name, for your glory, I will live, I will worship with my heart. For you alone are God, for the cross, for your kingdom, for your truth, I will boast of your great love. For you alone are God. Yes, you alone are God. Yes, you alone are God. All right, let's go ahead and this morning turn it over to Larry for the reading. Take it away, Larry.
Thank you, David, for the wonderful worship. A lot of times during worship, I need like a hanky. I don't have one, but my eyes are definitely well washed right now. Appreciate that, David. Celebrate the worship of our Lord. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the reading, and happy Father's Day to all the gents out there. Today's reading will be in Deuteronomy. So we go to the Old Testament, the 5th book from the start, chapter 6. So let's everybody get out our wonderful word of truth, the sword. Open up the sword. Be careful, it's kind of sharp. Turn to Deuteronomy. We're going to go to chapter 6, verse 1, and continue on. So right now, let's have a word of prayer. Dear Lord, Holy Spirit, you are our best friend. All glory and honors is yours. Be with us today, Holy Spirit. Be with the pastors today, Holy Spirit. Give them clarity. Guide them to your wonderful truth. Help us to understand better, Holy Spirit. We thank you so much for everything you do, helping us in our daily lives, renewing our mind, rebuking us, bringing us back to the path when we stray, giving us confidence, love, and affection, and wisdom and truth. We thank you for all the things you do, Lord Holy Spirit. We pray in our precious Savior's name. Amen. Okay, so we're in Deuteronomy chapter 6. Hopefully everybody's there. The title of this chapter is Obey God and Prosper. And that's a wise mandate right there. Chapter 6, verse 1. Now this is a commandment, the statutes and the judgments which the Lord your God has commanded me to teach you, that you might do them in the land where you are going to possess it, so that you and your son and your grandson might fear the Lord your God, to keep all his statutes and his commandments, which I commanded you all the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged. O Israel, you should listen and be careful to do it, that it may well be with you and that you may multiply greatly, just as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you in a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is your God, and the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Then it shall come about when the Lord your God brings you into the land which he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you great and splendid cities which you did not build, and the houses full of all good things which you did not fill, and hewn cisterns which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant. And you eat and are satisfied, and watch yourself that you do not forget the Lord who brought you from the land of Egypt out of the house of slavery. You shall fear only the Lord your God, and you shall worship him and swear by his name. You shall not follow other gods, any of the gods of the peoples who surround you. And the brethren say, Amen. Passing over to Pastor. Happy Father's Day, Pastor. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Just want to say happy Father's Day to you and from the congregation, and may the Lord bless you. And hopefully that if you're not part of the congregation, you're listening, and happy Father's Day to you too also. Hopefully that, I guess the thing is, I was thinking too, that a lot of times when you say happy Father's Day, maybe it's not a real happy Father's Day for you, and maybe you didn't know your dad very well. But today's a very special day. I just want to say I really personally love being a father, and I'm very, very proud of my children and how they've grown up and the type of person they are, the character that they carry with them, and it's just a wonderful thing. And each of them are somewhat different, but yet there's some common things with them all too, but they're somewhat different. I know that the oldest, John Jr., he's a delight to me, very wise, and someone who's I can talk to on a real serious any serious subject that I need to talk to him about, I can talk to him, and even receive counsel from him a few times. So I really appreciate him, and I love him dearly. And then there's my daughter Tina Marie, which I think that of all the children, she's a lot like me in some particular ways. She likes to joke around. She's except she's funny, and that's the difference. She's has good timing. In fact, one of my sons told me, "You don't tell a joke very well." That's one of my sons, but I think the other ones feel the same way. But my daughter is funny. She has a sense of humor and very bright and very smart. And very, and let me just say this too, of all of my children, they're all very kind, which I really love that about them. They got good hearts towards people that are in need, that have a need. And then there's David, who's got his own sense of humor, that him and his mom get along so well. They can talk very well, and I really admire him because he's also very, very, very smart too. He's extremely smart. He has a mind to pick up things quickly, and he's a joy to be around. And then I have Isaiah. He's to me, he's like the scientist in the family. Very very analytical, and very kind-hearted. And so I really appreciate him very much, and very helpful. There's things he can do. He picks up very easy too, and I just appreciate him very much. But I consider him the brains. He knows a lot. He just has a good analytical skills. He can detect things and knows how to put things together. But what's interesting, they all have that ability to let me start with this. They're all very kind, and I really appreciate that about them. But yet they're not kind without discernment. They're very smart as far as what to do, what not to do. And I really appreciate the fact that they all have a very strong love, and I love them very dearly. I'm just very proud of them. I don't want to say too much because it seems like I'm just bragging, but I want to brag a little bit. And also there's my son-in-law, Jamie. Him and I get along really good. We eat the same type of food. We have a somewhat similar humor, and he's pretty funny too. I guess him and Tina Marie, or maybe Tina taught him how to be funny, but he's pretty funny too. He's got a way of sneaking in some humor too. But I really appreciate him too, because he's a very kind man, and so I'm proud for him to be my son-in-law. I couldn't ask for better, to be honest with you. But don't tell him that, because it may go to his head. Just kidding. But I'm really just happy to be a father, and I love being a father. And so, and also got a daughter-in-law, Robin, and Robin is terrific too. I really have a lot of love for Robin, and in fact, all of us here at the house do. But Robin's you couldn't ask for a better mom and a better daughter-in-law. And she has her funny ways too. She can make you laugh too when she wants to. But she's so busy being a mom, and she's a wonderful mom. And so I just thank all those that are my children, either by marriage or my natural children. I love them very much. Okay, let me get started. Okay, please turn with me to Ephesians chapter 6. And the title of today's message is "A Christian's Father." Basic responsibility, a Christian father's basic responsibility. So as fathers, as Christians, we have certain responsibility. In the area of fatherhood, the best word I could think of was responsibility. It's like someone says, well, what kind of parent are you? Well, you should start with responsibility. And let me just say this too, I have a little difficult time talking about fathers separate from mothers, because they're really, according to this passage we're reading here in Ephesians chapter 6, it seems like they're always connected. They may have not exactly the same exact responsibility, but the responsibilities are very similar. But they each have their own particular responsibility. And the Bible doesn't separate them as far as the raising of their children. So let me read Ephesians chapter 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with the promise, that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. And fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So when you think about fathers, I've been around a long time and I've seen different types of fathers. And, even as a father, I had to go through different stages of growth and so forth. And what I've seen is that, in today's environment, there's some very good fathers. And it just makes me proud to see how well they lead their families and stuff. So they're very good fathers. Then I've seen some who are they're just okay. They take some of the responsibility and they do some of the things. They're okay in the sense that they're average, just put it like that. So you have the above average, then you have the average, and then you have the poor fathers. And those fathers have children, but really don't take much responsibility at all. In fact, sometimes they just leave, and they leave their children, and it's pretty sad to live your life without a father. I had a father, and who was had to take care of a lot of us, and very strict. And I really didn't appreciate him until after I became a father, and I became a man and be able to see the things that he had to go through, and so it made me to be far more understanding than I was growing up. But he taught us two basic things: work hard and don't make excuses. Work hard and don't make excuses. And it seems like today that there's that may not always be the case. But for a good father, you can see he takes his responsibility very serious. So I don't want to spend time. We all can do better, be better fathers. So I don't want to spend time. I don't want to just get down on you. What I want to do is I want you, if you're in need of being a better father, and like I said, we all are, as to focus on the things that are going to be said today, and gathering some of them from Ephesians, and then we'll go to where Larry read in Deuteronomy chapter 6. So here in Ephesians 6, I want us to look at the things that are being said and to see what can be corrected, because there's things that can be corrected. A lot of times if you're going to counsel parents, many times it's the father not taking his responsibility, and other times it is, they're really good, but there's things that sometimes need to be corrected anyway. So and I think it's a good place right here to start in Ephesians. And so I'm going to begin with I'm going to have five basic things that are needed in order for a Christian father, because Ephesians is talking to Christians. It's addressing Christians. It's assumed that both parents are Christian, and if they're not, it creates other problems. But here it starts off in verse 1: children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. So here it talks about that children are to obey you. If you're a father in the household, your children are to obey you. But it says your parents, not only you, but your wife. So as the head of the house, you need to make sure that that your children don't dishonor your wife, which is their mother. Don't dishonor your parents. Many times you find that children are acting in a dishonorable way towards their children towards the parents, and that of course needs to be addressed. And how long does that last? Well, children are to obey their parents as long as they're in the household. I know a lot of times people use age, and the world uses age as well. They're this old now. That's their decisions. I don't know what. I can't treat them like little kids. Well, obviously, you don't want to treat adult children as little kids, but they still are under the obligation of obeying the rules, the guidelines that are at the home. So it says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. It's the right thing to do. And it's not limited by age. Like I say, when you do that, I think a mistake is being made, because many times says, well, they're already 18, as if that means they can do whatever they want to do or not do. And I think you have to be very careful of that, because now you're giving a license for them to not obey. So you want to make sure that you obey. When it says children obey your parents in the very first verse, you know what that implies? It assumes that you taught them as a father to obey you and your wife. You taught them as a father for your children to obey you guys, and they don't just automatically come out obeying. They come out the opposite end. So you have to teach your children to obey, and so that's part of the way that you're leading them, so they don't grow up being disrespectful, and you end up creating a Christian culture in your home. If you're a Christian, you ought to be creating a Christian culture. And it's improper for children not to obey their parents. They were designed to do that. They are under the authority of the parents. When it says, for this is right. So it's not a matter of age, it's a matter of them having to obey. If they're in the household, they're called to obey. You know, like sometimes they're 18 years old and you tell them to take out the trash and so forth, or clean up the yard or cut the grass. They don't want to do it. And part of the problem is that they weren't made to do it, or it could be sometimes that they're at a rebellious state and they're just being very difficult. But if they're at your house, they need to obey and do those things. And things run a lot smoother for you as well as for them. So as fathers, make sure that you teach your children from when they start getting out of the womb and they start growing up a little bit, teaching them that they need to obey and not disobey. And what that assumes, that particular verse, is that parents are the ones giving the instructions. When it says children obey your parents, that means that the parents are the ones that are giving the instructions and not the children. When you flip that, you have the children telling the parents what to do and what not to do, what they can do and what they cannot do. And that creates chaos. No, it's the parents that are to tell the children what to do, not the children telling the parents. So you got to make sure that you have that right. That's assumed here. And then it says, it also assumes that when you say children obey your parents, it means that the parents, you as a father, you and the missus, are in charge of the household. So the father is to make sure that that him and the mother are the ones in charge of the household. It's not the kids who are in charge. And a lot of times problems start there when you see that the kids are in charge. They flipped it. It's like the kids are telling the parents what to do, always arguing with the parents about everything. You need to put your foot down and as a father and stop that and make sure that your children are put in subjection to you as parents. And this is what is right, the scripture says. And so it's very important. It also assumes another thing too, and it says, children obey your parents. It assumes that both you as a father and your wife, the mother, are on the same page. It's assuming that because you're giving instructions. So it assumes that both parents are on the same page, that there's a unity that comes into play here, that you're united as far as what you're telling your children to obey. You know, what they can and cannot do. You're united in that. And this is an extremely important aspect of teaching your children to obey. Guys need to be on the same page. Because what happens when you're not first of all, let me say, unity creates strength. Now you're both on the same page, you're both saying the same thing, you're not saying different things. But when you're saying different things, where the mom is saying something and you as a father are saying something else, you know what it creates? It creates a disunity, and when you have disunity, it creates weakness in authority, because now the kids come back to you and say, well, mom said this, but you're saying that. Why don't you guys get yourself straight? in the sense that's true, but it's not their place to be talking like that to you. And yeah, you guys need to get it together. And unity is a very important time. A lot of times we're talking to parents who have family matters, and it has to do with their children. One of the first places that we address is them as parents, and they usually think you're going to talk to them about just about their children, but it begins with the parents. If the parents are not united in their direction, they're fighting about their direction and what's okay and what's not okay, and they haven't come to an agreement, it creates a lot of problems. And so that's the starting point. Well, who's saying, well, he says they can't do this, and I think they can, and this and that. So you have arguments between the father and the mother. These are the parents. They're supposed to be giving the instruction to the children, and it's causing chaos, and you don't want that. But when you have unity, it runs a lot smoother, because then you're saying, hey, the mom should say, Dad says no, and I say no too. We're saying no, you can't do this. So it's the mom supporting the father, and the father supporting the mother. And when parents do that, there's unity. So understand that, men, that you need to work towards unity, not just get upset about things, but work towards unity. And it's your job to press on for the unity. As a father, you should press on and strive for unity, because there's power in being united and leading of your children. So when there's division, it's not good. It's going to lead to problems. It's a guarantee going to lead to problems, and it's going to be the kids seeing that disunity and coming at you because there's disunity there. You need to be united as far as your direction, as far as what they can do, what they cannot do, and even the whys behind it and so forth. Now, I do know that the deeper explanations come when they get older. Now, when they're children, no, you need to do this. They're not a big explanation as to why all the time, but they should be a beginning of telling them why. You touch that, you're going to get hurt when they're small. And if you touch that, you're going to get burnt. Or you touch that, that's dangerous. Don't do that. Don't do that to your sister. Don't do that to your brother. There's things that you're teaching them. But you get more in depth when they get older as far as why they can't do certain things if you need to. But hopefully they're trained well enough while they're young, and so when they get older, there's not that much confusion what goes and what doesn't. It becomes part of the household, and so they when you have that Christian environment, it's much easier to raise your children. It's because you did the groundwork already. In other words, when they were young. So it's always going to be when there's just unity, like I said, it's always going to be problems. Now look at Matthew chapter 12, if you will, just for a minute. Matthew chapter 12. And Jesus discusses, or he simply brings up this unity in Matthew 12. And in verse 25, this is what he says in Matthew 12, verse 25. And knowing their thoughts, he said to them, any kingdom divided against itself is laid waste. Notice he's talking about a kingdom here. Any kingdom that's divided against itself. Well, how do you get divided against himself? Everybody's going different directions. Everybody's doing their own thing, and many times it's the leaders that are not in sync with one another. And then it says this, and any city, you have a city. Look at the cities today. People are going in different directions, and there's no real leadership many times. Or house divided against itself shall not stand. And so that's very important when he says, or house. If you have a divided house, divided authority, fathers, you and your wife are divided on how you're going to raise your children and what are the things that they need to do or not do. You guys need to get your act together and be united. If you're doing that, that's great, because you've already talked about it. Kids are not seeing disunity. And if you have disunity, it's not going to stand. So that tells you unity is an extremely important aspect in the raising of your children. Very, very important. So it's calling parents to have a unity. So when it says children obey your parents, it's talking about that they're giving out the same information. There's unity there. And when you obey your parents, it's not confusion. Dad says this, mom says this. Fathers, make sure that there's unity within you and the missus. And it says, obey your children in the Lord. So here it assumes too that not only is there unity, but what they're telling their parents to obey are the things in the Lord. They're telling their children to obey the right things, the things of God. And it says, for this is right. So these are things that are right. These are things that are proper. So when you have, just want to make a comment real briefly on unity again. When you have unity as a mom and dad, it takes away a lot of the confusion. Where you guys are not arguing with each other, you're not confused about it. You're in agreement, and the children are not playing you because they know there's unity. There's unity there. So it removes all the confusion, and it strengthens the authority. So authority is coming from both parents, whereas disunity undermines your authority. Disunity undermines your authority. Unity strengthens the authority. Okay, does that help? I hope that helps. So that's extremely important. So where there's no unity, you're going to have problems. When there's unity, it's going to be much easier to lead your family in the Lord and what they should be doing and not doing. And so those, and you know what? Some things that you tell your children are flexible, but others are directly from the Lord. You're not to be flexible on those things that are clearly right. So the next thing it brings up, the second basic of Christian fathers should be having is love your children. You should love your children, and it's not just a love that just a talking type of love. Well, I love them so much, and all that, but it's a love that is demonstrative. That your children all know that when you're disciplining them or instructing them, it's because you love them. So it's very important that they understand that you love them. And so it's not just with words, but it's by your actions. Your actions are demonstrating your love for them. Now look at 1 John chapter 3, and it gives us a little insight into love and how it's demonstrative. It's not just I love them. You hear a lot of times moms or dads are saying, I love my children, but the actions that are being displayed don't demonstrate that. And so many times the children are sensing that they're not loved, and they'll say, well, my mom or my dad never loved me. A lot of times you hear, my dad never loved me. Verse 16 says of 1 John chapter 3, verse 16. We know love by this. So he's saying this is how we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. How do you know? Here's a perfect example of love, someone that's willing to lay their life down. And as fathers, if our kids know that they're more important to us than our very lives, that we would be willing to lay our life down for them. I was listening to a story. It came in the news yesterday, and what happened on the beach. That this kid was swimming, and the father was out there too. And there was a shark attack, and the shark attacked the son. Well, guess what? The father came to the rescue and kicked the shark on the nose to get him away from. He was already doing some damage to the son, but he kicked him in the nose, and it scattered the shark. And I just found out from Larry that's what you do if it's a shark. You kick him in the nose. So he kicked him very hard in the nose, and he rescued his son and brought him, and they took him to the hospital. But the thing is, that's telling you his son could never say, well, my dad doesn't love me. Oh, he loves him, all right. He was willing to risk his very own life for the sake of his son. So your children, fathers, need to know that you love them. A lot of times, because we're different as fathers than women, right? We're different from the moms. The moms did display it emotionally many times, but many times a father doesn't. But our actions should demonstrate that we love them. The things that we do, the things that we say ought to demonstrate that we love them dearly. And so, My dad would always say, after he became a Christian, all the time, "I love you, I love you, son, I love you, son." And it's like, oh, I love you too, Dad. But that was part of the everyday thing. And then the older I got, I realized how much he loved me, how much he gave of his life to love all of us as his children, and his hard working and everything. But so here it says that we know love by this, that he laid down his life. So we need to, and that's saying Christ laid down his life and he demonstrated it towards us. It was a demonstrative love that you could actually see. And then he says in verse 17, whoever has the world's goods and beholds his brother in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God abide in him? In other words, come on, you know somebody has a need and you don't provide. Love, when you provide, that demonstrates love, right? Somebody can say, I love you, and don't provide nothing when there's a need. But there's need, and you demonstrate that love. So when you say to your children, I love you, there's acts that demonstrate that you do. So they really don't have a leg to stand on if they say, well, my dad never showed me love, or my dad doesn't love me. No, the acts demonstrate that. So then it says in verse 18, little children, let us not love with word or with tongue. And what he's saying here, not just with word and with your tongue, but in deed and truth. And so as fathers, our deeds and the truth that we're speaking should demonstrate our love for our children. It's never enough to say, oh, I love you so much, and send a card. You know, those are nice things. You could receive cards and all that, and then to say nice things. But the thing is, it shouldn't be just with tongue, just with words. It needs to be a demonstrative love, where they can see by the things you do, the things you actually help them in and are willing to do for them. That's demonstrative. You demonstrated that you love them. And so there's no question. Like if somebody says, does Christ love you? Oh, yeah. Well, has he demonstrated to you? Oh, yeah, he has demonstrated. But he gave his life for me. And because the Christian, we know love. That's how we know love to the fullest extent, for the perfect love, is that he gave his life on our behalf. That shows love. So as fathers, you need to demonstrate that love, and by the things that you do, by being there for certain events that are important to them, by helping them with their schoolwork maybe, and so forth. You should demonstrate you love them. And yeah, even sometimes with gifts, but it needs to be a demonstrative love. And so it says this in verse 19. We shall know by this that we are of the truth, and shall assure our hearts before him. So it's very important that we demonstrate with our hearts love. Love is something that can be demonstrated, and we know that we're walking in the truth when we're demonstrating love to our children. So it's very important that love is a key factor in the raising of our children. You know, the Bible says God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. So that's demonstrative. That's saying, where is his love? His love, he gave his son. That's the best type of love. But it's demonstrative, it's not just said. I know a lot of times you hear people say, I love you so much. Well, where is it demonstrated? You know, you're not there at any of the children events. You're not there to support them in anything. You're not teaching them anything. That's not love in the biblical sense. But when you're doing those types of things, I know many of you fathers are. You're trying to be there as much as you can. You can't be there to every single event, and your children need to understand that too. There's certain things that you have to do sometimes that don't allow you to be at certain events. But even with that, you explain to them, I can't because of this and that. Sometimes it's your work, sometimes it's but things of that nature. But sometimes you can make it up as a father. I'll make it up to you, and then you make it up to your children. But love needs to be demonstrated. And when you get to be teenagers, if you got small ones, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. You're going to understand what I'm talking about, because they're going to sometimes bring up the fact that, but you never did anything for me. You never loved me. No, it needs to be demonstrated. So they cannot legitimately say that. Sometimes they'll say that anyway, but they cannot legitimately say that. And so love your children. That's very important, but in a demonstrative way so that they know. It's not say, well, it's in my heart. No, that they know. They need to know what's in your heart towards them. They need to know that in your heart that you love them and they're dear to you. And so even when you're correcting and explaining things why they can't do something, it's because you love them dearly. It's much easier for children to take instruction from the dad if the children know that my dad loves me. Even if I don't agree with everything that he's saying about why I can't go, he loves me, and I know he's looking after me, and so that makes it so much easier. And it's not like they're always saying that to you, but it makes it so much easier to know my dad loves me. And and it's very sad to say that even within the congregation, some of you grew up without the love of your father. It's just not right. It's not right. It's not right that sometimes you find fathers just walk away and don't even have a concern about their children that they've had, that they're fathers of. In no way even acting like a father, not taking responsibility. And that's what distinguishes a good father from a no good father, is that one takes responsibility, the responsibilities of a father, and the other side, no responsibility, just ignore their kids. Like, and I've always been bothered by this too, by fathers sometimes saying, well, I give alimony when they're separate from the wife. I give alimony to it. Like, if that's enough, that's not enough. You know what made you do that? The court system made you give the money there. But that's not enough. That's way too little. Children need their fathers. No matter what age they're at, they need their fathers. We're in great need of we need fathers. And many times they're not around. And so you have the mom left to raise their children, and that's not enough. It's extremely difficult for a woman to raise her children by themselves. It's the responsibility, God-given responsibility of the fathers to head up their households. So as a father, you need to take that very serious. So we need to love our children and to demonstrate by being there for them and supporting them when they're doing the right things, or when they're doing things that we're proud of them, their accomplishments or whatever. And so we need to be there to support them, so they know my dad loves me. They may not be saying it, but they already know my dad loves me. And I know some of you can't even say that. My dad loves me. Okay. The third thing I want to talk about that's a basic responsibility for the Christian
Dad,
father. Yes.
before we move on,
Sure.
I have the stream picking up my voice this time, so we should be good. But like in Ephesians chapter 6, right, if you go back to that in verse 4, where it says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, that's the perfect example of the opposite of what you should be doing, right? Like we were talking about your actions showing love. The opposite is provoking your children to anger. You can do that as well, right? If you're, as you mentioned, not always correcting them, doing the right things to your children, you can provoke a different attitude out of them, right? A hatred for their fathers, essentially. And a disdain for their father. And really here, there's the instruction to don't do that. Don't abuse the what God's given you, right? The power that God's given you, essentially the authority, right, over your children. But do the exact opposite. To raise them up in discipline and instruction, right?
Exactly. And that's good. That's good. Very good comment. Exactly. And it's interesting that it doesn't tell mothers, but it tells fathers, do not provoke your children. It's the fathers that can provoke their children, because it's probably more common for fathers to provoke and to provoke them to anger. So thank you, Dave. Those are good comments. Yeah, exactly. So let's move on a little bit further. And the third thing is the Bible calls for fathers to do It calls fathers to provide for their children and to protect them. It's a responsibility of the father chiefly to provide for them, provide for the family, and to protect them. Of course, it's also the mom's duty to provide things to and to protect them too. But the main responsibility comes from the father. He's called to protect them. And what that does, when your children know that you're protecting them, they grow up more secure. They're not afraid of everything that comes up. And many times things come up, like when they're going to school and something with other kids, and they don't tell you what's going on a lot of times because they're afraid to tell you. Rather, they should be able to tell you so that because they know that you're there to protect them, and they need to know that. Security many times comes from the parents. When your kids are growing up, they're very scared about things. They don't understand things, so they need a strong father to let them know, I'm here and I'm not going to let something happen to you. I'm going to protect you. And so you can calm them down, calm their nerves down. And so you have to be careful. And I think too, we need to be careful of giving them too much information about what's going on in the world, because it scares them. They don't know how to filter through that. It scares grown-ups. So if you tell them too much about things like that, they're not really ready for those types of things. So don't overdo it. But there's some things that you need to tell them that are basic things, but not in-depth things when it comes to that. So anyway, the next thing is that we need to, like I said, we need to protect them and as fathers and provide for them. Look at 1 Timothy chapter 5, if you will. 1 Timothy. You know, I might have to go a little next week and finish this off, because I did want to get into Deuteronomy. But chapter 5 of 1 Timothy. And we're looking at verse 8. Verse 8 says this. This is very important. Verse 8 says, if anyone does not provide for his own, meaning for his own family. Now, if you have a father who's the main provider, who's supposed to be the main provider, the one that's providing, it is definitely the responsibility, the chief responsibility of the father to provide. If anyone does not provide for his own, meaning his own family, and especially those of his household, especially zeroing in on the household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Now, notice what it says in regards to a Christian. When you're not providing for your family as a Christian, you're worse than an unbeliever. You're doing the total wrong thing. You need to start at some basic things. A lot of times you find men who learn the faith and they want to learn all the things of all the answers and everything, and they're neglecting the very thing that's right in front of them, the providing for their children. And there's a strong rebuke there. If a person doesn't provide for his family, he's worse than an unbeliever. And you know why he's worse than an unbeliever? Because even the unbelieving parents, the unbelieving fathers provide for their families, usually, right? And so you're worse because you don't provide. It's a basic thing that you're supposed to provide for them. And you provide protection, and you also provide food on the table, clothing, and so forth. And to provide for them is talking about providing for their needs. They have needs, but not everything's a need. You have to sort through that too. Some are just wants. And there's nothing wrong with sometimes giving them things that they want. But the scriptures basically is talking about the basic needs of life. They need food, they need clothing, and they need to be secure. They need to provide security for them. And that's a big part of being a father. And like my wife Irene, when she talks about her father, he was a provider. I mean, and the security was that it's going to be all right because Dad's here. He went to work, came home. He went to work and came home, and everybody was secure because he's a provider and he's there. Things are going to be okay. When they took trips, it's going to be okay because Dad's here. So they grew up with that sense of security already. Why? Because it was shown that they could be secure and rest in the safety of their dad. Dads are extremely important. But when the dad's in and out of the home, goes to jail and does this and does that, they're not secure in you at all. They're not secure in your love. You're not secure in what you provide, because you're not providing nothing except problems for them and embarrassment for them. And so it really needs to be, I didn't want to get on people's case, but sometimes that's the case. That's the situation. It's not good. It's ugly. And then you ask the parent who's locked up because they did something wrong, you love your children? Oh, yeah, I love them so much. I'm writing them these letters, and well-written letters many times. But where was it shown that they do? You think the kid just falls for that? After a while, when they get older, they don't fall for that. They start seeing, this is just talk. My dad's a good talker, and he knows how to write, and none of it's true because it wasn't demonstrated. So there's a lot of fathers that are not doing their job in any sense. And that's a horrible father not taking responsibility for these things that we're talking about today. So we're called to provide. Look at Matthew 7. I thought it was an interesting passage in Matthew chapter 7, because here Jesus is addressing, he brings up the unbeliever. And sometimes we think, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And it's like, wait, okay, hold it right there. Let's take a look. Matthew 7, verse 9 through 11. Now, Jesus is saying this. Or what man is there among you, talking about fathers, when your son shall ask him for a loaf, will give him a stone? If your son's hungry, he's asking for a loaf, right? Guess what the father does? Among you, he says, you're going to give him something to eat. That's normally what happens. You're going to provide something to him to eat. Then he says this, or shall he, are you going to give him a stone instead? No, obviously the answer is obvious. You're not going to give him a stone. You're going to give him what he needs. Or if he shall ask for a fish, will you give him a snake? Will he? What's the obvious answer to that? If you love your kids, not going to give him a snake, obviously. You're going to provide for him. He wants a fish. He wants some bread. He's hungry. You're going to provide those things for him. Or your daughter. Verse 11 says, if you then being evil, talking about the evil fathers, if you then being evil know how to get good gifts to your children, even some of the most evil fathers, guess what they do? They're evil men. They're wicked men. They give good gifts to their children. You know, some of these drug lords and everything, guess what they do for their children? Buy them fancy cars. They give them nice, real good gifts, right? Big gifts. How much more, and then he says, shall your Father who is in heaven give what is good to those who ask him? So what is he saying? Bad fathers or bad men, even they provide gifts for their children. So it's not the fact that, well, I gave them this and I gave them that. Okay, that's nice that demonstrate that you care about them. But that doesn't demonstrate you're a good father until you do the other responsibilities that are needed. And let me just say this, because sometimes you'll find that children are very hurt and damaged because the father is not really raising them. And what he's doing sometimes is to make up for it by just buying gifts. And what buying gifts does for him, thinking that he's providing for his child and he's making them happy, and it eases his own conscience, because the father knows that he should be doing more than just bringing a gift. But he tries to smooth things over for his kid and for himself. And see, that's not enough. Even the most wicked men do that. The drug cartels do that. They give good gifts to their children, and they're not good men. They're evil men, but they do give them good gifts. And then he says, hey, guess what? If they do that, guess what your Father will do in heaven? Ask him, call upon him. So I'm going to give you a snake when you ask for a fish. Okay, so that provision needs to be there. We need to, as fathers, provide for them. If not, you're worse than an infidel. So you better put away the doctrine for a while and settle on this one doctrine first. Provide for your children. Be there for your children. Encourage your children. Help them along the way, your children. So fathers, don't just get into this, well, I know all this, I know that. You need to do more than that. You need to start at the basics first. There's basic things the scripture is telling us that's our responsibility. And some of you are doing a terrific job. And I'm so proud of you. Because I could see it. I could see you provide. I could see you take care of them. And your kids are secure when you're around. And guess what? When they get scared, it's the father that can hug them and assure them that things are going to be okay. It's going to be all right. And you could hear the kids are many times crying because they're scared. When the father comes in and calms them down. Your dad's going to take care of it. Your dad's going to make sure that you're not going to get hurt. Your dad's not going to let any bad guys come around. He's going to take care of it. So, very important. So we had children obey your parents. You're teaching as parents. You teach them first how to obey. You don't let your children talk bad to their mom, nor to you. You put that in check. My dad. If we were talking in an aggressive way towards my mom, we said something that she didn't like. You know what she would tell us? You do that one more time, I'm going to tell your father when he gets home. And guess what? I used to call him he's the old gunfighter. When you tell him the old gunfighter that when my mom told the old gunfighter what you did, what you were saying, how you were acting smart, that's all she wrote. He took care of business. And since there was 14 of us, there wasn't a long conversation about what's going to be done. We know it's going to be, time to get a whipping, because that was not allowed in the household. My father would not allow, and he's the one that enforced that. My father would not allow us to talk smart aleck to my mother. We tried to get away with it sometimes when he wasn't around, but the enforcer came. You better not do that, because you're in big, big trouble. So that the children honoring their parents was a very serious thing. That's why the scripture is saying it's a very serious thing. If it doesn't start with them respecting you guys and honoring you guys as the ones that are giving the instruction, you're undermining your household. So a lot of times counseling comes in, well, what are you guys doing as parents? Well, we don't agree with this, or we don't do with that. And sometimes we let them the freedom to say, so, well, how do your kids respond? And they're dishonoring the parents, either one or both of you. Well, he doesn't listen to me. He listens to his dad, but he doesn't listen to me. Dad, you make sure that your children listen to mama too. And I think a lot of times that's the father's one of the things that he can do is to enforce those things, to make sure that they're carried out. You do not behave in that manner towards your mom. And it needs to be strong. And if you have a strong father in regards to those things, and you stop that dishonoring, because when they start young, they try to do it, right? When they get older, if you hadn't stopped them when they were young, guess what you're going to have? Just think about it. It is not going to be nice, because they've grown accustomed to saying whatever they want to say. No, they don't have a right to say whatever they want to say. And so you need to be very careful with allowing them to go beyond the limits where they're not dishonoring. And then the second thing I brought up, there needs to be unity. You guys need to be united as far as your direction and so forth, and you're united in the teachings of the Lord. And then fathers, you need to demonstrate love for your children. They need to know that you'll go out of your way for them. They need to know that their lives are more important even than your own, and then you would be willing to lay down your life for them. They need to know that. And then they need to know that you're going to provide for them. There's going to be food on the table. There's going to be clothing in the house, and those needs are going to be met. You're not going to be starving because Dad's there. Dad's going to provide. Dad's going to take care of that end of it. Okay, so it's extremely important. And the fourth thing is discipline your children. Please discipline your children. So in Ephesians 6, if you go back there, go back to Ephesians 6 and take a look at this. Ephesians 6. Where we're at. It says this. Verse 2, honor your father and mother, which, and again, those things you have to teach them, right? You have to teach your kids to honor you guys, and don't let them dishonor you guys. And it's really nice when they honor because they're respectful to your parents, and not disrespectful, and not always arguing. That's not honoring. And then it says that it may be well with you, and that you may live long on the earth. And so what he's saying, that as a parent, that as children, you need to honor them. And he's not talking about little kids anymore. When it says that they may be well with you, it's giving you a promise attached to it. You want things to go well, then respect your parents. You know, the old saying they used to say that, hey, if this woman that you want to marry, if she's disrespectful to her parents and doesn't honor her parents and are very rude and mean to her parents, don't marry her. Or if the father or if the guy is disrespectful to his parents and mean to them, sisters, don't marry him. You're asking for problems. And just think about it a little bit. When they dishonor their parents, that tells you something about their character. And guess how they're going to treat you? You stop and think. So it's extremely important. This honoring aspect. And you know, you could see when somebody honors their parents. When they grow up, they're respectful to their parents. I can remember that we used to go pick up my mom for breakfast once in a while. We'd take my mom out for breakfast. And my wife, to honor my mom, would sit in the back seat. And guess who sit in the front seat next to me, who was driving? My mom. And sometimes you'll, well, I ain't putting her first. No, that's honoring her, respecting her. And so we had no problem doing that because we were showing respect. Now we picked up her mom. The reverse was true. Her mom got in the front. Her mom was given her proper place, respecting them and honoring them as for who they are. And to be careful how we speak to them because they are our parents and we love them dearly. So the fourth thing I said is to discipline as needed. You know, that's very, very important. Notice it says in verse 4, and fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. And that would be the wrong way of correcting them. The point where how do you provoke them to anger? By constantly being on them about every single thing. I mean, you're provoking them. You're causing them to rebel against you. That's what it means. You're actually causing them to rebel because you're just constantly on them. Now, sometimes you need to be constantly on them on something that they keep doing. You need to stop. But just to be constantly on them about every little thing, about a sock that's on the floor, about a shirt, everything. You don't. If you do that, you're erring greatly because you're provoking them to anger. And once they get angry, now you're talking about children. When they get older and they get angry, there's a big divide now. There's a big wall there because they're angry. And guess how well they listen when they're angry? The same way you respond when you're angry. You don't listen too much either. And so your children are, if you provoke them, fathers, be careful that you don't do that. Be careful that you to take the time to explain why you're doing what you're doing, but to keep pushing them and pushing them and pushing them about every day. So, as a father, you need to sort out what's important and what's not. What calls for you? What demands you to take action and what doesn't? Some of the things are just nothing things. You need to let the nothing things pass. And so you'll find when it comes to children, you'll find some children that are well disciplined because you could tell when you see well disciplined children, guess what you normally think? Man, they did a good job with you. Man, they raised you right. That's a natural tendency to say that. They raised you right. You're polite. You carry yourself well. Man, somebody did a good job with you. You must have, yeah. And then usually the kids say, yeah, my parents, they raised us right. And then because the way the children behave, it's automatically it's gonna be a reflection of the what? Of the parents. What the parents did or did not do. So the behavior of the children is a reflection of you guys, especially of you fathers. Hey, my father was right there, because I'm talking about fathers today. So you find well-disciplined children, it's a beautiful thing to see. And then you find some children that are over-disciplined. And that's where the provoking comes in. They're over-disciplined. Everything's a problem. You can't stop bothering them all the time about everything. Everything becomes a problem. You better need to stop and think about over-disciplining. I mean, a lot of times Christians fall into that category. They're trying to raise their children in the proper way, but it's overkill as far as what they're disciplining them about. They're nitpicking, and nitpicking is over-disciplining them. And you could see the children are downcast in that case. They're not happy at home, they're miserable because they're picked on and picked on and picked on. Guess what that means? They can hardly wait to get out of the house. And sometimes when it comes to a woman, the first guy that's going to take them out of the house, that's where they go. You can't nitpick and discipline your children like that, where you're constantly picking on them for everything. So be careful with that. I remember we had with my daughter, we had an issue with clothing and with makeup, because that's when you got a daughter, that's what's going to happen. So you better listen to what I'm saying. I didn't care for the clothing, and I didn't care for the way the makeup was put on. And so, guess what she thought about my opinion about stuff when it comes to those two things? And what do you know about that? So, and I already knew that. So I knew the mentality. So what I did, I told her, well, let's go to the experts. Let's go get a video from the library and experts in makeup. And let's see if it matches up what you're doing. So guess what? Okay. Get a little huffy. Okay. Got some videos and everything. And it's like, it started to change. But it wasn't because someone's dad said it, but it's like the experts are saying it, right? The experts are saying too much makeup and too much this and that. And back in the day, they would call the girls that had a lot of makeup chachas, They're chachas. And so you don't want to be a cha-cha. So I don't want my daughter to be a cha-cha. So the makeup adjusted. And now you look at the way she puts her makeup on today. Very well, very well. Thank you, Father. Okay. And then the clothing. Here's the thing with the clothing. The clothing, I didn't like it at all. But there was nothing wrong with it in the sense of it being immodest. It was the choice of clothing that you wanted. And at that particular clothing I'm talking about, the colors were fluorescent. And it's like fluorescent shoes, fluorescent pants, fluorescent top. It's like a walking light bulb, right? Coming out of the room. You're going to school with that? Well, that's the way we dress and all that. So there was nothing wrong with it in the sense of being wrong in a sinful way, in a bad way. But it was just a style I didn't like. So I had to back off on that, on the style thing. Because to me, it looked like these circuses where you're coming out with bright colors and all this like that. And they're going to put you inside of a cannon and shoot you out. Everybody can see you because you're fluorescent. Everything was fluorescent. And she got older, she said, why did you let me dress like that? Wait a minute. That's the clothes that you picked. You picked that clothing. But I let her dress like that because there was nothing really wrong with it. It's just a preference of styles. And so you have to be careful that you're not nitpicking because of the style. If it's not immodest, there's nothing, okay, let her wear it. Let her go and wear it. It's not your taste, but there's nothing wrong with it. Does that make sense? I could have made a bigger thing out of it, but I needed to check myself because it wasn't it wasn't right for me to nitpick her clothing. So some of the stuff I just kept in my mind, like, wow, what's going on here? The styles today are crazy, you know. Like today, it's people wear torn pants. Like, what is that? But that's the style. Is something immodest about it? No. Do I like it? No. Back in the day when I grew up in the projects, torn pants meant that you didn't have any money to buy. Somebody wasn't providing for you. We had torn pants. Nobody that had the provision of clothing wore torn pants. And we used to sew them up when we had torns. And so, but nowadays, torn pants, boy, they're expensive. I mean, at some point in time, you're going to look back and you're going to say, why are we doing that? Why would we buy pants that are torn? I don't figure it out. But I wouldn't, as a parent, I wouldn't say I would disallow my children to wear torn pants. They want to wear torn pants. I think it's a little bit cheaper, don't you think? Or you can, give them their old pants and let them tear them a little bit. But that's preference, and so wouldn't have a problem with that. So you have to understand that children need discipline, and that's why it says in verse 4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. The discipline, and we'll talk about that instruction, I think, next week, because we're already running out of time. But the discipline. So you'll find some children very well disciplined. They grew up to be disciplined too because they were disciplined at the home. So they know how to control themselves. They know how to act and how not to act. And so they conduct themselves very well and they make you very proud. And then there's like I said, a second thing, over discipline. You don't want to do that. But you also don't want children that are without discipline. What happens? You ever see children that are not disciplined at all? You see them in stores and markets around you, right? And how does that look? What does it reflect on right away? The mom and dad. Whoa, look at that. Fathers, you got to make sure your children are disciplined. You discipline them when it's needed. And it's important, the word I'm using, needed, because it is needed, but it's not always needed. Sometimes a word of correction will do it. It's not always needed. But when it's needed, you need to incorporate discipline. That they can't do certain things. They can't act a certain way, especially in public. They have to control themselves. And I know when they're young, it's very difficult to control yourself in a sense because they're used to running around, especially boys. Boys are many times act so undisciplined. But that's kind of the nature of a boy, that they have all this energy. It's not always they're acting undisciplined. Sometimes it's just that they're boys. Boys are going to be what? Boys. That's the old saying. And girls many times are much more calmer until they get to be teenagers. Remember I told you that. Until they get to be teenagers, then all of a sudden it's like reverse. Sometimes the girls are harder to deal with than the boys. But when they're young, it's usually the girls are more calmer. But remember what I told you about when they get to be teenagers, okay? That kind of flips a little bit. But discipline is needed for the purpose of correcting their wrong behavior and their wrong way of looking at things, their wrong attitudes. I'm talking about attitudes. So for wrong behavior and the wrong attitudes. If they got bad attitudes, that needs to be corrected. Attitudes are very, very much important because you don't want that to be ingrained in them, where they think they can have the attitudes that they have. Well, I didn't do nothing. I just said it. Well, that's telling me something about what you think. And I don't like that attitude you're having. Like an attitude can be expressed. And like if you tell your kid go clean your room, and they give you an attitude about it, even though if they clean it, there's still an attitude. So you need to bring it back to the fact they may say, well, I did what you told me to do. Wait a minute. Don't you have that attitude towards me? You raise your voice again, I'm not tell your father. Mothers need to say that, and the father needs to deal with the attitudes. And the mother as well, but don't let attitudes control the day. Well, they did do it and make excuses for them. No, wrong attitudes create a problem. And I don't mean it just because they have a hard time doing something or don't want to particularly do it, but they have to do it. Okay, I'll do it. That's not necessarily an attitude. But when it's an attitude, when they want to respond to you in anger and disrespectful, that's attitude. That needs to be dealt with. Now look at Proverbs chapter 29, if you will. Proverbs 29. The book of Proverbs, right in the middle of the Bible somewhere, right? Chapter 29. Okay. And the verse I want us to look at here is verse 15. Now notice what it says in regards to discipline. Verse 15. The rod and reproof gives what? Wisdom. Well, how do you think it gives wisdom? The rod and reproof. The punishment and the correction brings about wisdom. Why? Because you're showing your children that they cannot get away with that kind of behavior. And so you're correcting them. When it comes to correcting them, where you have to give them a little swat, all children don't need the same amount of correction. It's like if I give one, I'm gonna give them all. No, you need to sort through that because you don't correct them all the same. When we grew up, the one that hardly ever got corrected, and because she didn't do much, but my sister Maggie, the oldest one, she saw what was happening to the ones that were out of line, and the correction that went there. And so in her wise mind, I'm not going to do that. So she got very, very, I can't remember her getting a spanking. I got a lot of them because I needed it. But my sister Maggie, she didn't. And it's not because, she's the favorite. Well, you know what? You tend to favor the children in the sense that are behaving themselves, not acting up. So yeah, we got corrected, but not every child it needs to be done as needed. Not every child gets the same. It's what's needed at the time. So it says the rod and reproof give wisdom. It gives them understanding. You can't get away with everything. That there's consequences. They need to know there's consequences for wrong behavior. And it says, but a child who gets his own way, that's a child that you don't, undisciplined. You let them do what they want. They get their own way. Well, you're not going to tell me what you do. Well, sometimes you hear, usually moms, well, they're just kids, and we just try to let her express herself and let our kids express themselves, and that's all. They grew up like that. They'll learn as they go along. No, but a child who gets his own ways brings shame to his mother. They bring shame. So as fathers, you don't want your children to think they can get their own way. That is, now they're the ones in charge. They're the ones that'll tell you what they can and cannot do. And like I say, age is not a factor. As long as they're in your household, the rules that they go by, children, not age, children, obey your parents. Honor them. So fathers, you got to make sure of that. And things are going to, if you got young children, it's going to make more sense to you as you go along. And as your children grow older, the things that are going to come back to you, hopefully, what I'm saying today. So you don't want your children to get their own, just do whatever they want to do. But a child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother. So that's a child that's in control instead of the parents. That's a child that's in authority instead of the parents. And that creates a problem. You don't want that. And I'm going to stop there. But discipline is for the purpose of correcting wrong behavior and correcting wrong attitudes. And it's showing them that there's consequences for wrong types of behavior. Now think about it. When you get out in society, what do they need to know? You get out of control, and you could be thrown in jail. You get out of control of school, they can kick you out of school. If you get out of control, you're putting yourself in a bind over and over. But if they're raised properly to understand there's consequences for wrong behavior, they're going to be more self-controlled. They're going to be able to control themselves much better than the child who was used to having their own way. Many times you'll find fathers are absent from the house and the mother's left to raise the children. And guess what? A lot of those children that are raised, especially young boys, They have their own way. They do whatever they want to do. And there's no father to step in to say, that doesn't fly. You're not going to do that. You better sit down and start acting right, because there's consequence for that. You're not going to stay here doing whatever you want to do. And those things have to be corrected, because they're going to have, if not, they're going to have problems later on in life, and even in the job. If they don't want to take instructions from their parents when they go to work, they're not going to want to take instruction from their boss. When they go to school, they're not going to want to take instruction from the teachers. So is that not learning to not disobey and have your own way, it carries on with your life. And then you think you're a victim about everything. You know, a lot of times today, children, they're victims. You know why? The parents allow them to think that. You know, today we're all champions, supposedly. You know, we're all number one. It's not the way it works. It's not the way it works. All your children are not number one. You know, they're number one as far as your love for them and your care for them. But everyone is not a champion. And when they get bad grades, that's not what at least they tried. No. They weren't trying very bad. They got bad grades. Unless you want to say they're stupid. And I don't think most fathers wants to say that, because they may need your help, but they need to do the things that they need to do. You don't want to do everything for them, but they need to do their part. So as a father, you're extremely important to the household, extremely important, because the mother should depend upon you to enforce some of these things that are difficult for her to enforce. But you need to come at it with unity. Talk to your wife, sort it out. Let the argument be there, and they'll come out united. Talk to your wife, and set the ground rules as far as what's allowed and what's not allowed. So I'm going to close there. And I thank you for listening this morning. And I just want to say we'll pick this up next week. And in our congregation in August, James and Vanessa are going to have a child, and they already know, because nowadays they can tell you whether it's a male or female, and they already picked out the name. It's just going to be a son, Emmanuel. James and Vanessa, these are good things for you guys, and learn some of these things and keep them in mind, and I'm sure you guys will be a very good parents to little Emmanuel. And God bless you guys, and I hope that the delivery and everything goes well with you guys. So let's have a word of prayer. Father, I want to thank you for the parents within our congregation, and even for the James, Vanessa, who are going to be parents, Lord, in the very near future, come August, Lord. And I ask, Lord, to bless them, and I pray, bless the child, Lord, and not only that they would love, but they would demonstrate that love to their children. And that James, the father, would lead his household, and him and his wife Vanessa would get together and decide how to be united in the sense of direction. So, Father, I thank you so much for your word that gives us so much instruction when we look at it, and there's much depth in it. And I know that I can only scratch the surface, Lord. But I thank you so much for the precious word that you've given us, Lord. And please help us as fathers, Lord, to be the kind of men that we ought to be, and to lead our families in the proper way, Lord, in a way that we could bring up the proper type of children with the proper behavior, and that they would be well disciplined, Lord. And that we'd be careful not to over discipline or under discipline them, Lord. But we need to be sure that we do things in a proper way, Father. Again, we want to praise you and glorify you, Father, because you are a great Father to us. And the fact that you demonstrate your love for us, Lord, by the giving of your Son. And Father, I ask your blessings for the rest of our day, and the blessings on fathers today, Lord. And I want to just say I thank you for the fathers that we have in our congregation, and how they attempt to raise their children, Father. So, Lord, help them, Lord, as they try to correct whatever needs to be corrected, if anything, Lord. Well, in that sense, we do all need some correction, Lord. But thank you for them, Lord. And so
Thank you for my son who's doing a great job with his wife and the raising of their children. And the very fact that he's so involved as a father, and sometimes it's like, whoa, it's great to see that, Lord, and how that love grows in the midst of his involvement, Lord, more and more. So bless them too, Lord, with that. Again, I thank you so much. Thank you for my dad that you've given me, and my deep appreciation for his love for us, and he's always reminding us to say, I love you. And I thank you, Lord. He always expressed that he loved us, Lord, and that he loved us by providing for us by every day in the morning, going out and working, and coming back very late at night, Lord. And I just want to tell you thank you. And for my wife's dad, and what a wonderful man he was too, Lord, and how he led his family and loved his children, Lord. And so I just thank you so much for that, Lord. So bless them, Lord, watch over them, and watch over my children and the congregation's children, Father. May you help us as fathers, Lord, to do what's right and to have a consistency. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
So, just about thinking about today's message today, maybe think of a song. So I want us to close with a song before we go. But whether or not you have a good father or a bad father, we all as believers have a common father, right? We can always turn to him for the shortcomings of the fathers that we have, or turn to him in times of trouble, turn to him when either when your father's abandoned you or hasn't been good to you, or even when he's good to you, right? There's still so much that we can turn to our Father for. And God is a perfect example of the perfect father, right? And as fathers ourselves, that's who we should be aiming to be like. Is taking on more of his characteristics to become a better and better father. So let's sing this song as we think about our Heavenly Father. Think about his love. Think about his goodness. Think about his grace that brought us through. For as high as the heavens above, so great is the measure of our Father's love. Great is the measure of our Father's love. How can I forget his love? And how can I forget his mercies? He satisfies, he satisfies, he satisfies my desires. Great is the measure of our Father's love. Think about his love. Think about his goodness. Think about his grace that brought us through. For as high as the heavens above, so great is the measure of our Father's love. Great is the measure of our Father's love. And how can I forget his love? And how can I forget his mercies? He satisfies, he satisfies, yes, he satisfies my desires. Great is the measure of our Father's love. And how can I forget his love? And how can I forget his mercies? He He satisfies, he satisfies, he satisfies my desires. He satisfies, he satisfies, yes, he satisfies my desires. Great is the measure of our Father's love. Great is the measure of our Father's love. Yes, great is the measure of our Father's love. All right, everyone, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll continue on with next week. And happy Father's Day. So have a great day. Thank you.